Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we're starting a new series on personalities of the Napoleonic Wars. And I thought where better to start than the man that lends his image to the very channel itself, the sabreur General Antoine Lasalle. I thought going in that, this is going to be a fairly short episode. I mean, he couldn't have crammed that much into his life. Well, it turns out I was wrong. He most definitely did. And in this series, I'm going to briefly discuss the career of some of the lesser-known Napoleonic personalities. Not the unknowns, but less famous than your Napoleons, your Wellingtons, and your Murats. And then, hopefully at the end of each video, I'll talk about using them in games of Black Powder, or, potentially other games as well, and we'll take it from there, really, which manufacturers make models to represent them. So, we're going to start off with General Lasalle. He's a particular favourite of mine, so much so that, as I said earlier, he lends his very image to the channel. So, Lasalle was born in 1775 in Metz to minor nobility. His first taste of military life was on June the 19th, 1786, when, at the age of 11, he joined the Foreign Infantry Regiment of Alsace, making second lieutenant 3 years later, at the ripe old age of 14. When the revolution broke out, he was assigned to the 24th Cavalry Regiment, but because he was the son of nobility, minor nobility, one of his previous ancestors had actually been a Marshal of France back in, Louis XIV's days. But I think the Lasalles had fallen on harder times since then. And because he was still nobility, though, he lost his command under the decree that removed all nobles from command in the military. But as with many other commanders, instead of turning his back on France and on soldiering in general, he instead re-enlisted as a private soldier, where, as a member of the Army of the North, he was elected sergeant in the 24th Horse Chasseurs. So very early French units, Revolutionary Wars era French units. They had slightly different names to the later ones. But, think chasseurs, and you're kind of about there. So, after Lasalle led a daring, bold, and insane charge on an Austrian battery, his squadron commander recommended he be made an officer. But Lasalle refused, saying that it would take him away from his men. Eventually, however, he did take that commission, and being friends with the Kellermans, who would go on to be great generals themselves, and, spoiler alert, perhaps future subjects of this series. And he became an ADC to Francois Kellerman, the elder of the two, and good friends with Francois's son Etienne Kellerman. And due to this staff position, Lasalle became a captain in 1797. As much as he enjoyed staff work, Lasalle didn't spend his time only sat behind a desk. At the Battle of Rivoli, he galloped ahead with 26 men of the 22nd Horse Chasseurs, and after routing an entire Austrian regiment, he also attacked and destroyed groups of Austrian skirmishers. Then, he and his surviving men joined with the cavalry columns of Lebly and Vial, and Lasalle captured 5 of the 11 colours that were captured that day. With his typical insouciance, when the colours were presented to General Bonaparte, Captain Lasalle was asleep on them. The future emperor said, "Go to sleep on your flag, Lasalle, for it is well deserved." And that was the first time Lasalle was really introduced to the young General Bonaparte. So, how would this close association with Napoleon lead his career to go? Well, being a bona fide swashbuckler, like what he was, Lasalle jumped at the opportunity to join the Egyptian expedition when Napoleon asked him personally if he would come with him. And he played a crucial role in the Battle of the Pyramids, not once, but twice. First, he led an assault of 60 men on the village of Mbabe. Sorry for pronunciation now, I should be better at Egyptian than I am French, but there you go. And he routed the garrison and provided a safe haven for the army. So those of you who know the Battle of the Pyramids, the French army was on the plain, and they sort of had to get into safe haven, really. And that's what this village provided against the all-mounted Mameluke army. So the second vital role that Lasalle played was after being shown a secret route through the pyramid fields of Giza, he and his men cut off the retreating Mamelukes allowing Napoleon to crush them and earning him promotion to Lieutenant Colonel of the 22nd Horse Chasseurs and of the 7th Hussars. So back in those days in the Republican armies, you often had demi-brigades, which would, they'd be later known as a brigade, I suppose. But it was often 2 units combined together in 1 unit. So if you were playing a game, you would have 1 unit fielded of half, in this case, the 22nd Horse Chasseurs, and half the 7th Hussars. But I think that's such a cool, evocative image of LaSalle leading these French troops through, past the Great Pyramid. And it's the romance of the Egyptian campaign, something that really speaks to me. Anyway, so a few days after the Battle of the Pyramids, LaSalle was fighting with some Mamelukes when his sword was knocked to the ground. I should say the Mamelukes were the Egyptian cavalry, great horsemen. You'll see them in my video on the old guard light cavalry. Great horsemen, very, very dashing, very daring, all about individual skill. And that's great when you're fighting isolated troops of enemies, but when you're going against what was then a modern, efficient army, not great. But in hand-to-hand combat, definitely no slouches. So a few days later, he was fighting some Mamelukes when his sword was knocked to the ground, his wrist cord being snapped. In the middle of the fighting, he calmly dismounted, picked up his sword, remounted, and continued to fight. This unflappability, even in the middle of swirling cavalry combats, made him incredibly popular. Nowhere was this more evident than at the Battle of Remede, another terrible pronunciation there, where LaSalle cut off both hands of a Mameluke that was poised to deliver the killing blow to General Davout, saving the future marshal's life. In that battle he also broke both of his pistols, which I can only assume was done in some clubbing action, and then broke his sword over the head of Osman Bey himself, so of the enemy general. But he still wasn't done. He borrowed the sword from a wounded dragoon, went back into the fray, and forced the Mamelukes to flee. That's incredible. In recognition of his efforts when back in France, Napoleon would replace his broken sabre with the Sword of Honour, and he was promoted to full colonel. Something that I love about LaSalle, and one of the many things I love about LaSalle, is that he would, from then on, always wear red baggy trousers in the Mameluke style. You'll see in the images in this video, from the paintings, he's got his voluminous red trousers on. So, after his return from Egypt, LaSalle's career went into a bit of a funk for the next 6 years, as life at home was not for him. It bored him massively. He founded the Society of Alcoholics, which that sounds good to me, and one day Paul Thibault counted the empty wine bottles that they'd had the night before, and he asked LaSalle, "Do you mean to kill yourself?" LaSalle then gave one of his most famous quotes, "Any hussar that does not die by the age of 30 is a blackguard," which I think is particularly good. He also gambled heavily. Upon announcing his engagement to Marshal Berthier's sister-in-law, Napoleon gave him 200,000 francs. When asked when the marriage was by the Emperor a few days later, LaSalle replied, "Sire, when I have enough money to buy the wedding presents and furniture." Napoleon said, "But I gave you 200,000 francs last week. What did you do with them?" The colonel at this point replied, "I used half to pay my debts, and I have lost the rest gambling." So I think that reply would have pretty much broken any other man. But Napoleon laughed and then gave him another 200,000 francs. He did, however, he sort of, he joked about losing or gambling. He did genuinely love his wife. And in an age of political marriages, that wasn't necessarily as common as you might think. He took on his wife's children from her first marriage, which there is some rumour that they might have been his anyway. But he took them on as his own, and he treated them as his own children. So, as I say, in a world, particularly in Imperial France, marriages were often for convenience, to try and get within Napoleon's inner circle. But it does seem that LaSalle genuinely loved his wife. But love her or not, she couldn't compete with the lure of war. And even at the training camps in Bologna, where he was made a member of the Légion d'honneur, he wasn't really fully satisfied. And his restless spirit was only really soothed when he was sent to Spain on an ambassadorial capacity. He was actually, while he was in Spain, he was challenged to a duel by a man who he had been caught, shall we say, in flagranti delicto with this man's wife. Obviously, LaSalle, being one of France's greatest swordsmen, felt it would be a little unfair to kill this man, so he only defended himself throughout the duel. But he did so with such force that he actually snapped the wronged husband's wrist, which is pretty hardcore. Anyway, Napoleon, I think, possibly realising that he A, had use of a man of LaSalle's skills, and B, that LaSalle probably wasn't doing a great diplomatic job in Spain, summoned him to join the Grande Armée as it geared up for what was to be his absolute masterpiece, the Austerlitz campaign. So at the Battle of Austerlitz, LaSalle went into action immediately with the Dragoon Division of General Klein. No messing about for him, he was straight in there. He also, later on in the battle, charged with Murat's reserve cavalry. But, he was another colonel taking part in the charges here. Good, but nothing super spectacular. However, in the Jena campaign of 1806, he really came into his own. He was the head of a Hussar brigade, consisting of the 5th and the 7th Hussars, and they became known as the Brigade Infernale, or the Hellish Brigade. I think it sounds better in French. Even better when you can pronounce it properly. At the Battle of Jena, he personally captured the King of Prussia's bodyguard, and his cavalry forced the Prince of Hohenlohe's army to retreat. Now, being light cavalry, anyone who's seen my videos on light cavalry will know that their primary role really was to pursue a broken enemy and cut down the men as they fled. Well, that's what the Infernal Brigade was sent to do, and the enemy had taken refuge in a fortified Prussian town called Prenzlau. So a bit like how we'd had in Egypt, the Prussian infantry here were retreating from the French and holed up in a walled town. Marshal Murat commanded LaSalle to attack the town. Now normally, and any war game will tell you, that cavalry are not the kind of troops that you attack a town with. But LaSalle, he didn't care about no town. His men burst through the northern gates of the town and rode down the main thoroughfare and into the Prince of Hohenlohe's troops that were forming up on the far side of the town, completely scattering them into the woods. The next day, on the 29th of October, LaSalle and his hussars marched to the fortress of Stettin, arriving well ahead of the main French force. He prepared to attack, but then decided on a route de guerre instead. Pretending that the entire army had arrived, he demanded that Stettin surrender. General Romberg, the Prussian who was in command of the defence of the city, said, "Tell your master that the town of Stettin was entrusted to my safeguard, and that I shall defend it to my last man." LaSalle, undeterred, replied, "If, by 8 a.m. you have not surrendered, the town will be bombarded by our artillery, stormed by 50,000 men. The garrison will be put to the sword, and the town will be plundered during 24 hours. Convinced that he was faced with the entire French army, General Romberg decided to enter into negotiations, shall we say. And that evening, he surrendered. Over 5,000 men in the garrison of Stettin and 281 guns were surrendered. I mean, that's a formidable obstacle that Napoleon would have faced. Overnight, LaSalle became a national hero. Napoleon wrote to his corps commander Murat, "If your light cavalry captures fortified towns, I'll have to discharge my engineer corps and have my heavy artillery melted down." However, in spite of this absolutely incredible victory by LaSalle, his troops were absolutely exhausted. They'd been hard marching. Remember that light cavalry are there to pursue the enemy. They're always pursuing, capturing a couple of hours sleep here and there, maybe even sleeping on the march, always with their swords in the back of the enemy, as Napoleon phrased it later. And LaSalle would later write of his hellish brigade, "Who would recognise the brilliant hussars from Cronrac 14 months ago? Those of the 5th Regiment wear their white pelisses with lemon yellow braids and their sky blue breeches. Those of the 7th Regiment with their green pelisses with daffodil yellow braids and their scarlet breeches. Today the whole brigade, men and horses adorned alike in mud, have neither form nor colour. Their uniform is misery." And I think, that really says something to me. I think it says something to most wargamers. We focus on, what were these? Were these brass buttons, or were they steel buttons, or what kind of cuffs did these guys have on? We've got a direct quote from a commander there saying that by the time you've been on the campaign trail, even a victorious army, you're covered in dirt, you're wearing whatever you can wear. The whole uniform thing, something of a bit of a myth, a bit of a fetish almost of some Napoleonic gamers, in my opinion. But anyway, one of the reasons that LaSalle was pushing so hard, in my opinion, was that he was now 31, officially a blackguard by his own definition. And although it sounds crazy for me to say this, at 31, I think maybe LaSalle felt that he was getting too old for this kind of hard soldiering. So that was the end of the Jena campaign. In November, having run the Prussians out of their own country, the French army began tussling with the Russian forces. At the Battle of Golymin, General Lasalle led the Hellish brigade against a Russian battery of 12 to 15 guns. The Hussars charged, but were abruptly seized with panic, turned about, and in disorder fled to the rear. Of the whole brigade, so that's 2 regiments of cavalry, only the elite company of the 7th Hussars, placed immediately behind Lasalle himself, remained firmly at their posts. Lasalle was furious. He rallied the fleeing cavalrymen and brought them back, kept them within short range from the Russian guns as punishment for their behaviour, standing 20 paces in front of his men, remaining motionless and calm, although under heavy enemy fire. When he thought that they'd suffered enough, he ordered, "Break the ranks," and with the support of Klein's Dragoon Division, the guys who he was with at Austerlitz, they charged enemy battery from the flank and routed them utterly. As the armies went into winter quarters in 1806, it was announced that the Guard would be strengthened by the addition of a Polish light horse regiment. Now, some of you may be aware that I'm quite fond of the Polish Lancers, so yeah, there you go. And LaSalle, having been promoted to General de Division, was tasked with training and commanding the newly raised Polish Lancer Regiment. Well, they weren't Lancers at that time, they were Polish Chevaliers. They would later become Polish Lancers. A Polish officer later wrote, I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name, a Polish officer wrote of that time, "It was in LaSalle's school that we learned outpost duty. We have kept a precious memory of this general, in whom all the lovable and imposing qualities of a born marshal were combined. He should have replaced Murat, to whom he was vastly superior." But as with his desk work or his ambassadorial work in Spain, LaSalle was no training major, and by 1807 he was back facing the Russians in Napoleon's Polish gamble. At the Battle of Heilsberg on June 12th, Murat was surrounded at the height of a melee by no less than 12 Russian dragoons. LaSalle was in command of 3 brigades of light cavalry, containing the Hellish Brigade, 2 Lancer regiments, and 5 horse chasseur regiments. LaSalle saw Murat in trouble and charged the enemy, killing the officer who commanded the detachment and putting the 11 dragoons on the run, saving Murat's life. Shortly after, Murat and other members of the Hellish Brigade saved LaSalle from certain death. Afterwards, while shaking hands, Murat told LaSalle, "General, we are even." The following July, Napoleon made LaSalle a Grand Cross Knight of the Order of the Iron Crown, and he was sent to Spain under the order of Jean-Baptiste Beziers. So, while he was in Spain, LaSalle commanded the 1st Light Cavalry Division, consisting of the 8th Hussars, the 13th, 16th and 24th Chasseurs. He waged a war in Spain that was unlike anything else seen in the Napoleonic Wars to this point. He cut a swathe through the country, and after the town of Torquemada resisted his men, it was put to the torch. It was said of LaSalle that he made Spain tremble. But it's important to know that he didn't do this because he was a psychopath who enjoyed doing this kind of stuff. He did it because it was effective. The town of Planesia's guerrillas fled to the hills on just the mere rumour that LaSalle and his division were on the way. And for the hard fighting across Spain and for his efforts, he was named Grand Officer of the Légion d'Honneur and made a Count of the Empire. LaSalle was called back from Spain once again to join the army, massing to take on Austria in the 1809 Danube campaign, just like he had been in 1805. His excitement at being ordered to join Massena's corps in Germany was made clear by a chance meeting with Roederer and Thibault in Burgos. To Roederer's question that, was LaSalle going to go via Paris, he replied, "Yes, it's the shortest way. I shall arrive at 5 a.m. I shall order a pair of boots. I shall make my wife pregnant, and I shall depart. Oh, LaSalle. He left immediately to take command of the Light Cavalry Division in the new 4th Army Corps, commanded by Massena, formed the eyes and ears of the army, as they were, that was the primary role for Light Cavalry. On the 21st of May, they crossed the Danube between, the rather nice, quaint German towns. You may have heard of them. One's called Aspern and the other one was Essling, right into the teeth of the Austrian army. Liechtenstein, the Austrian general, ordered 9 regiments to engage LaSalle's men, but they were held to a standstill. That's 9 regiments of Chevaliers and Dragoons. For the rest of the battle, LaSalle was filled with short, sharp engagements, quick charges that would force the Austrian infantry to fall back or maybe into square or battalion mass, and it gave the hard-pressed French infantry some much-needed respite. At the end of the battle, though, the army was forced to withdraw to Lobau Island in the Danube, and there they spent a rather wet, damp, miserable night. But that was not the end of the war. Only 6 weeks later, the French were on the Marchfeld, and the largest battle the world had yet seen was about to be fought, the Battle of Wagram. On the eve of the battle, opening his luggage, LaSalle found his pipe broken, a bottle of liqueur, and a broken glass that had been used by his wife. As a result of these omens, he told his aide-de-camp, "I will not survive this day." He drew up a petition to the Emperor asking him to take care of his children, and gave it to one of his friends to deliver to Napoleon, if necessary. He also wrote a letter to his wife that read, and you're going to have to apologise, you're going to have to forgive my French here, "Mon cœur est toi, mon sang à l'empereur, ma vie à l'honneur," which I think, terribly said as that was, translates as, "My heart belongs to you, my blood to the Emperor, my life to honour." And I think that's, that's not just sort of words from LaSalle. I think he genuinely felt that way. On the night of the second day of the Battle of Wagram, LaSalle's men had still not been ordered to fight, so LaSalle went to Marshal Massena to ask permission to pursue the enemy. Massena ordered him to go to General MacDonald, and LaSalle exclaimed in frustration, "The battle is almost finished, and we are the only ones who have not yet contributed to the victory. Let's go, follow me." LaSalle was temporarily separated from his division, and accidentally alerted a battalion of enemy infantry, and so the Hussar general charged them with the 1st Cuirassier regiment. LaSalle was shot in the chest, but continued the charge. The enemy infantry was broke and routed, as LaSalle and his regiment of 1st Cuirassiers pursued them. As he charged into the next enemy, a Hungarian grenadier shot him between the eyes and killed him instantly. An attempt was made to avenge LaSalle by leading a following Hussar regiment against the square of Austrian grenadiers, but this was unsuccessful. And so it was that General Lasalle died. The wars before the 5th of July 1809 were battles of daring do, of rogues and villains, of units dressed in their finery, and of gentlemen surrendering their swords. After that they were existential wars, where to lose was to be destroyed. That Hungarian grenadier didn't know it, but when he pulled that trigger, warfare would never be the same again. So that's the quick summary of LaSalle's life. Now, I think I'd like to talk about LaSalle quickly on the tabletop. Now, Black Powder don't have rules for him at the moment, because they don't have any rules for anyone. It's pre-1812, which is a bit of a shame. But, there are figures available for him. I think Eureka do a dismounted version. That's from a famous painting, which you'll have seen in this video. And the picture that forms the advert for the channel, the Charge of LaSalle, the final Charge of LaSalle. Front Rank do a lovely model of that. I own him. He's upstairs. That's a great model. So there are miniatures of him available out there. For Black Powder, what would I suggest his rules-wise? Well, I think he should add 2, at least, perhaps 3 dice to any regiment that he joins for close combat. He's clearly a very aggressive general, so I'd give him the aggressive trait. And I think as a special rule, I would perhaps give him the ability to do a follow me order as a brigade order. Maybe once per game, because I think doing it every turn might be a little powerful. But he can issue follow me to his brigade. Now you could say you can order it to any cavalry regiment, because he did charge with the 1st Cuirassiers at the end there. But again, I think that might be a little bit too strong. So my recommendation would be that you add the formation to your army, the Hellish Brigade, 2 regiments of Hussars and LaSalle. You sort of plug them into your army, and he operates with those guys. That's it then. So thank you very much for listening this far. I want to make these videos around about the half an hour mark. I don't want to go any longer than that. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, well, thank you for listening this long anyway. If you've got any ideas of people that you'd want to see in the future, then please put them in the comments down below. I should probably have said what strategy rating I should have given LaSalle. I'm just thinking about it now. I give him strategy rating 8. Possibly even 9, but I think that might be a little high. I'd give him strategy rating 8 and aggressive. 7 if he's not commanding light cavalry. If you were to say that he can do his order to anyone. But if he's in the Infernal Brigade, I'd give him an 8. Infernal Brigade, would I give them any special rules? No, probably not. Maybe Tough Fighter, you know me. I love handing out Tough Fighter. But I don't think they were any better than any other Hussars, really. I just think they were led by General Lasalle. So, there you go. That's General Lasalle. That's his life and times. I hope you enjoyed the video. The next one in this series is already in the can and ready to go. I hope you look forward to that one and enjoy it. But that's all for today. Thank you very much, and goodbye.